we take our integrity and our credibility very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are there, we're delivering breaking news or we're giving people information that we know they need to have to make the right decisions for their own lives. We want to make sure we get it right.
Hey, welcome to Fill in the Blanks. We have a very exciting episode because I am featuring two remarkable co-hosts from Morning on Merritt Street. I'm talking about Dominique Sachse and Fanchon Stinger. Now, Fanchon and Dominique are veterans. They've been at this for a long time. Dominique hails from NBC affiliate KPRC in Houston, where she made her mark as a trusted news anchor, but that's not all. She's also a YouTube sensation, sharing beauty tips, lifestyle advice, and her journey to flourishing after 50 on her channel. And if that weren't enough, Dominique hosts the inspiring podcast Over 50 and Flourishing, where she dives deep into topics that matter to our generation. Now, Fanchon Stinger, on the other hand, brings her 23 years of broadcasting experience to the mic. She spent 12 years as an evening news anchor at Fox affiliate WXIN Indianapolis, delivering breaking news and captivating stories to viewers. Then she continued her impressive career at Fox-owned WJBK Detroit for another 11 years, and her passion for storytelling and her commitment to excellence shine through in every episode. So I asked them to be on here today because they have been really doing a great job on Morning on Merritt Street. And I want you to get to know them. And I want to talk to all of you guys about why I think you should tune in to Morning on Merritt Street every morning to find out what's happening in the world, get to know these people because they can be your electronic pen pals to talk about what's shaking in the world. So welcome, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dr. Phil. Good to be here.
We are excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you are. Now, you guys didn't know each other until you met here, right?
That's right.
That's right.
Did you know of each other?
I knew of her. In fact,
Yes.
my former general manager at KPRC in Houston was her general manager in Indianapolis.
Okay, and if you're listening, that's Dominique talking. Well, they can't see you.
I know,
They
I know,
don't
yes,
know.
yes.
So was she on your radar?
Yes, she was.
Fanchon?
Her general manager who hired me in Indianapolis told me about her in 2021 when she was getting ready to leave broadcast news. Right before I was getting ready to leave, he said, you need to check out this young lady because she's doing some amazing things on YouTube. I looked her up. So when I came here and I was told she was going to be my co-host, I said, wait, that name sounds familiar. I looked it up again and there she was. So I knew that there was something special. We didn't exactly know how special it was until we actually got a chance to meet in person. And instantly we knew.
I'm just glad she called me young lady.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
So both of y'all had left broadcast news.
Yeah.
Dominique, I'll start with you. Why did you leave broadcast news? You were obviously really good at it. You were very successful.
Mm-hmm.
You were in demand, but yet you walked away.
I did. Truth be told, I grew frustrated with the industry. I grew frustrated with the lack of truth in the industry. I felt a very strong sense of agenda that was taking place. And it really culminated during the Trump presidency and then COVID. And you could just see this industry sort of spin on a dime. And I think spin is the operative word. I just didn't like the fact that facts were being left out of storytelling. I think there was a lot of fear involved. I think there was a lot of unknown involved, and it was driving the direction of the media. And it was beginning to frustrate me because I was clearly seeing that there was another side of the story in both scenarios that weren't being told. And I didn't like feeling like I was a liar or I was leading out critical information to help the viewer make the best choice for themselves, whether it is politically or whether it's personally with their own health.
Did you feel like you were being forced to lie by omission, or were you being given copy to read that you knew was a misstatement of reality?
I'd say both.
Those both.
I'd say both.
Really?
Yeah.
Why did you leave, Fanchon?
The same reason. I got into this business to be a catalyst for change, to tell people's stories, to tell truth, to help people have hard conversations, to inspire, to encourage. And I always say that the media is one of the most powerful forces that we have. That's why whole countries use it as propaganda. And the media in the right hands with the right motivation, dedicated to truth and being unbiased and being objective, that is a powerful, beautiful force. But the media in the hands of people with the wrong motivation and the wrong heart behind it can be the most destructive force. And I watched that play out. I was in a newsroom where if you didn't go along with the narrative, you were ostracized. I had people who stopped talking to me. It culminated during COVID when I had a boss come out to the studio and basically threaten me and say, you're going to read what's in the prompter. And I said, no, I'm not, because A, it's not true. It's biased, and I know the truth. At that point, I had to make a decision, Dr. Phil, because I'm accountable for the words I say. I spent nearly 30 years building my credibility, building the level of integrity that people have come to trust. So if I know that critical facts are left out of stories, and I know that you are intentionally not covering stories, you're intentionally censoring people, I can't be a part of that and live with myself, because I have to be accountable once again for the level of ethics and integrity that I know are right.
Where do you think this comes from? Is this so vulnerable to manipulation that it comes from the producer of the news, the executive producer? Does it come down from corporate? Where does it come from?
I would say higher up.
I think now walking through this and experiencing this, I think it's coming from somewhere much higher up.
Yes.
Because there are stories that don't show up in the wires. So what happened when I was there and we were getting ready to leave, I had to watch news 24/7. I had to watch every article. I had to watch every press conference, because I had to know walking into the newsroom when I opened my show, well, this is missing, this is missing, this is missing. I wouldn't have known that if I didn't take the time when I was not at work to be watching every single thing that was happening, because I needed to be armed with all of the information so I knew what was not in the wires. I knew we were ignoring certain stories, opportunity zones, or whatever the story was. I had to say that. And when you would ask the producers, well, why aren't we covering this today? Well, we didn't know about it. Then that means you're not watching the news. You're not watching the basic things that are happening in our cities around us and in the world around us. So it's almost as if people know they're not telling the truth, but they have a reason to not tell it because they can say, well, we didn't know it at the time. So it's an unspoken agreement that I think is within the industry. And if you fight to tell the truth from the center, from being objective, then you are labeled right. You're labeled on the right.
Do you agree it's a willful blindness, or do you think
I think there's
it's worse?
Well, I think it's worse. I think that it's multi-pronged, and I would honestly say too, you've got to follow the money. You look, these higher ups, these managers, these corporations that own these news entities and outlets, what are they looking at? They're looking at the bottom line. They're looking at revenue. They're looking at advertising dollars. Who are the big advertisers? I mean, you talk about this all the time. Who are the big advertisers? And if you do stories that possibly go against some of your big advertisers, well, that might affect your revenue stream. So whose hands are in whose pockets? I mean, these are questions that need to be asked. Who is being appeased here and for what reason? What's getting in the way of telling the truth? And when I say that, I want to be very, very clear. My opinion doesn't matter. I don't want anybody to know where I politically align. It is of complete irrelevance to me being a good broadcast journalist. For me to be effective, I have to be down the middle. I have to be willing to understand and look at both sides and ask hard questions of both sides. But why we're getting away from that and why that has become such an issue of late, and you don't find very many media outlets that go there, I don't know. Maybe you can help answer that question.
Well, there's also another thing that goes with that too, like you said, Dominique. You know, this country was founded on basic freedoms. We have the freedom in this country to make educated decisions. Once you have a media and an entity that is willing to manipulate what the truth looks like, that's willing to omit information, you are fundamentally robbing people of their basic right to make fully educated decisions. And that is ethically wrong when it comes to the tenets of basic journalism. But that is what is happening. And it's happening so much that it has become the norm within the industry. And anyone who has the courage to stand up against it or to speak out against it is going to face retaliation. And sadly, that is what the industry has become.
If you look now at the news outlets that are successful, they take a position.
Correct.
Yes.
If you've got someone that tries to skate down the middle and just stay on that tightrope that doesn't try to influence the viewer, just stays down the middle, they're not very successful. Those that are successful take strong positions and they speak. It's like preaching to the choir. People that like to hear their point of view reinforced and echoed back to them, they go where they're going to hear what they want to hear. And so we do live in these bubbles. It seems to me that the viewer has to own a lot of this because they reward that behavior. Those that take that one-sided strong position get rewarded with high ratings. And those who try to balance it in the middle, it's like, well, I don't know what they're saying. I can't tell. I don't feel comfortable hearing from them. I'm not getting reinforced. I'm not getting comforted by the message. And so they look for somebody to tell them what they want to hear. It seems to me that the viewer has to own part of this. The viewer complains about it. I complain about it.
Yeah.
But when something happens, where's the first place you go? I mean, do viewers go where, I'm going to be told what I want to hear, or are they going to go where they're going to be told what they don't want to hear if there's a crisis? When the assassination attempt occurred on Trump, I, by design, clicked through the different news outlets to see what they were saying. Those that are decidedly anti-Trump were saying shots fired at Trump event.
They wouldn't even say assassination attempt.
No, they weren't saying he was shot. They were saying
shots fired.
Shots fired.
Yeah.
One was saying, loud noises. It could be fireworks. It could have been shots. It could have been fireworks.
One said he fell. I saw a headline that said he fell
I
on stage.
Or shrapnel or glass.
Then Director Wray from the FBI went before Congress just last week and said, we don't know if he was shot. It could have been the teleprompter glass. Now, the teleprompters weren't shattered. You could see them intact. They hadn't been hit. But what's the point of doing that? I mean, they're obviously trying to trivialize what happened. And then there are others saying immediately he was shot in the head and he's down. Well, is that good news, bad news? I think what people want to know is just tell me what happened.
Isn't that why you started this network?
Yes.
That's exactly why I started this network.
Exactly. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Well, I think that this goes back to something that happened way before the assassination attempt, and it has grown progressively worse. And I think if you look back at when Trump ran for office the first time and he started to say that there is fake news, he started to pull the veil off of the bias that exists. It's existed for quite some time, but when he exposed it so clearly and so in the face of the media, instead of the media at that moment saying, hey, we need to take an introspective look, we need to regroup and come out and do better. Instead of saying that and erring on the side of ethics and integrity, what happened was the media doubled down. And they, for lack of a better way of explaining it, declared war on Donald Trump. And it was an unspoken declaration that was played out through the entire industry. So people would say things. I had someone say to me one time, well, you're telling people to go to the, to get information from the White House. I said, well, that's the presidency. If people want information, they should get information from the presidency. The response was, well, this is a different type of president, so we cover this president differently. Since when is that a standard in journalism? I've covered presidents my entire career. You cover every president the same. It's the presidency. But because there was this unspoken declaration of war, it was almost as if, well, that gives us the right to omit, that gives us the right to smear, to slander, to misreport, to do all of these things. And it's not a matter of being on a side. It's a matter of looking at what is actually happening and being truthful about what we're experiencing.
I think the scary part of that is the public grew weary of the media and started not to trust it anymore. So the media used to be considered this crown jewel once upon a time of sourcing, trusting facts. You would go to your favorite media outlet. You would trust your anchor person who would deliver that information, and you saw it as factual and real. Now, nobody knows what to believe anymore. So here's the scary part. You have a whole younger generation that really doesn't consume or digest as much news as, say, we do. And now everybody's on these and they're scrolling. And now you've got people getting news from TikTok and all of these different sources. So how do we even know what's right? How do we even know what's factual anymore? And now we've got memes that are dictating how presidential elections will go. So the pendulum has now swung so far because of this lack of trust that it's got to get back to center. It's got to get back to truth. And it's got to get to a place where people feel like they can honestly trust and believe what's being told, but only if it's being done in a trustworthy way.
Well, and there are also people who have grown to trust the news so much. The older generation, they didn't realize that there was this declaration of bias. So they're watching and they're thinking they're getting the truth. And now we have a segment of the population that is literally brainwashed to believe things that are categorically not true. It's spin. And that's intentional.
What percentage of young people are actually getting their news from TikTok? I mean, there have been studies done about this.
I mean, my only source is my 19-year-old son, and who tells me that literally a majority of his friends get their content and information from TikTok or maybe certain news apps and outlets, but none of them watch traditional media outlets like we did.
And a lot of them will also say that there is a younger part of that generation that is now waking up to kind of what's going on, and they're going to podcasts.
Yes.
So they're going to like the Tucker Carlsons, the Joe Rogans, and they're listening and paying attention. And a lot of them are beginning to think.
Right.
It's almost as if a lot of them are beginning to wake up that, hey, wait a second, there's something really off here.
But I think it's also to what you pointed out, Dr. Phil, is that people are seeking like-minded content.
Yeah.
I'm going to find things that align with my ideology, my belief system, even though that ideology may be young and fresh and not fully formed. I've heard things from my parents. I've heard things from my peers. This seems to align. And they're not necessarily getting the full story or getting another side to, have some critical thoughts and to be able to debate and analyze coming from a place of logic and information and not emotion. And that's something that we talk about as well, is just how emotionally triggered and sensitive people are when it comes to news and information. And you can't have, I remember growing up, I'm a child of the 70s and the 80s. I remember people of both sides of the aisle would have conversations about politics, have different stances. You would agree to disagree. But these days, you lose friends if you're not politically aligned. Yeah. And that's got to change. The emotionality has to get out of it. It can't be, why do you feel that? Why do you think that way? Well, that's just how I feel.
Well, we've moved to an autonomous society where there's no absolute truth anymore. The people have been taught, and younger people have been taught, well, your truth is what you feel. If you feel it, that's your truth. So now we don't have an absolute truth anymore. We have truth that changes, and people are allowed to make up their own truth.
Yes, based on emotionality.
Columbia Review put out a study on March 15th of 2024. It was written by Joseph Cameron. He said that roughly a third of Americans aged 18 to 29 regularly get their news from TikTok. And the Pew Research Center found in late 2023 survey, nearly half of all TikTok users say they regularly get news from the app. And Twitter is another one. You can just look at it. A third of U.S. adults under 30 now regularly get news from TikTok, which is not vetted in any way. You can put anything on there. There's no editorial at all. There's no vetting. It can say anything in the world.
That's right.
I've seen things in the last few weeks, outrageous headlines that people would put on there, bold statements that weren't true, that were picked up and just spread like wildfire. You know, that old saying that a lie spreads like 6 times faster than the truth.
That's right.
There's actually been a study about that which confirms that that's true. And why? Because a lie is very tight. It's very succinct, because for something to be true, it has to include a lot of details. And, lies are easy to repeat because they don't require to include details and qualifiers. Right. You just say whatever you want to say, and it travels fast. It's quick. It's easy to repeat.
Because it plays on emotion.
Yeah.
And here's the study right here. Study on Twitter. False news travels faster than true stories.
Exactly right.
Research project finds humans, not bots, are primarily responsible for the spread of misleading information. This was a study done at MIT, and I had this in my book, We've Got Issues. We found that falsehoods diffuse significantly faster, deeper, and more broadly than the truth in all categories of information, and in some cases, by an order of magnitude. So if you're not checking and lies get up, they spread fast and people have misinformation.
Right.
And so they just treat it as the truth.
And they stand by it, they'll defend it.
So why did you get back into broadcasting? You both got out and you both got back in. Why?
Well, because there was somebody by the name of DrPhil who was starting this network who wanted to produce and present information that was fact-based and down the middle. And honestly, that's the first time I have heard that in a very long time.
It was a breath of fresh air. When I heard that, because my plan was never to go back in the studio to do broadcast news.
Never.
Never. You couldn't have paid me enough money to go back into that. And so when we heard that you were committed to telling the truth, both sides, accurately, truthfully, so that people can make their own decisions, I never thought that I would even hear someone say that again.
Me either. And I will also add this to people here know, the audience doesn't know, but your COO of news, Joel Cheatwood, is somebody that I admire deeply.
Yeah.
I've known him since 1994. He tried to hire me when he was at WSVN in Miami. And when I was contacted by him and we sat in that office and we talked for a good hour, and I heard his logic and his laser-like precision in the way he thinks, his clarity, and he will just think things and say things, and you catch yourself, you think, why didn't I think of that angle? That's what Joel does. Yeah. But he has such great news judgment. And I thought, all right, here's DrPhil starting this network with this belief system. Here's this COO of news who's in perfect alignment. It felt like congruence for me. And that's not something you feel all the time in this business.
No.
Yeah.
When Joel called me, I had spoken with him in 2021 about doing another project. And at that time, I was starting my nonprofit, and I didn't feel like that was the right time for me to get distracted in something else. When he called me about this, he said, Fanchon, I know this is perfect for you. And I came in, I sat with him, I listened to him, and it almost sounded too good to be true. And I tell this story, I left. I did not tell my parents. I told no one. I immediately prayed. And I said, God, if this is something that you're bringing to me and you give me the green light to do this, I'm going to put my whole heart into this, because I wanted to make sure that if I was going to align with anyone, it was going to be based on integrity, credibility, values, and making sure that we put out a message, because ultimately we're in a fight. Your book says that we are in a fight for the soul of this country. And I think a lot of people do not realize how serious that is and at what point we are at. We don't have much time if we're going to save the soul of this country and protect our children, protect the legacy, and protect the freedoms and the foundation of this country.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about that. And I don't think anybody can be a non-combatant, because not choosing is a choice. You can say, well, I don't want to get involved. Well, we're all involved because we're all part of this country. You can't not take a position. And I do take a position, and I want everybody at this network to take a position, and that position is we follow the facts. There aren't versions of the truth.
No.
There aren't versions of the truth, and you can't pick your truth based on where your advertising dollars come from. You can't pick your truth based on how you feel. I mean, I've said it before. People tell me, well, I feel this way or I feel that way. I don't care how you feel. I barely care how I feel. What matters is, what are the facts?
Right.
You need to look at the facts and make your decisions based on the facts. I mean, think about it in terms of life situations. If you were at the airport and there was a guy there with an airplane and he said, would you like to go for a ride? What would you say? Well, I've been a pilot since I was 16, 17 years old. I would look around and say, does this guy know what he's doing?
Right.
Is he a good
qualified?
pilot? And if the facts were he had crashed 9 of the last 10 times he had taken off, I would want to know those facts. It doesn't matter how I felt about flying. I would want to know if this guy crashes 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to pass.
Mhm.
If this guy's been out there forever and he's a safe pilot and he's done 1,000 flights and he always comes back in one piece and his airplane looks pretty good, everybody gives him a good report, that's good information. I need to know that. People need to check facts and make informed decisions. But there's something that's going on in this country that really bothers me, and that is we aren't teaching critical thinking
No, we're
anymore.
not.
That's it.
We're teaching young people what to think. We're not teaching them how to think.
And we need to do that. We need to teach people to say, look, if you're going to know how to make informed decisions and get through this life in a successful way, you need to learn how to do critical thinking. You need to learn how to make a hypothesis and test it.
That's right.
You need to listen to somebody's point of view and test it against reality. You need to know how to do rational thinking, which is really not that hard. First off, is this based on verifiable fact? Is it in my best interest? Does it get me what I want and need? Does it protect and prolong my life? If it doesn't meet those 4 criteria, you need to get a new thought.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's, do I take these drugs? Do I get on this airplane? Do I marry this person? Do I go to school or take this job? Whatever it is, you need to ask yourself, is what I'm telling myself true, factual, verifiable? Is it in my best interest? Does it get me what I want? Does it protect and prolong my life? 1, 2, 3, 4. If it doesn't fit those criteria, it's not a valid thought, and you need to generate an alternative to it. We don't teach kids that anymore. Like you said, we tell them what to think, and if they don't conform to that, they're ostracized or marginalized, graded poorly, put down in some way. We need to encourage them. I would a lot rather, so much rather, have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question.
Questions,
You've
that's
got
exactly
to
right.
have the ability to question the answers you're being given. Like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah.
Tell me why that's the answer. Tell me why this isn't the answer, why that's the only option. I need to know why, not just what. Tell me why. Isn't that the most important thing you get out of school?
Yes.
Is learning how to think?
Well,
we used
let
to be
me-
challenged.
Used to be. And I want to
Yeah.
ask you a question because all of this is so steeped in psychology. School does not teach children how to think critically. Parents are having to work 2 full-time jobs to barely pay for a roof over their house, let alone be able to spend the time to educate their children. So children are not taught critical thinking. They're scrolling, they're distracted. We have higher cases of mental health issues, attention deficit. So if things aren't coming at our children in warp speed that they can process lightning quick, how are they going to be able to learn? Because what you're talking about with fact checking and sourcing, that takes time.
Yeah.
It takes thought. It takes effort. And right now, what concerns me is that we have a generation that shuns that in the name of instant gratification, in the name of quickness, speed, brevity, and how little do I have to put in to get maximum result. I mean, this is a paradigm shift in how we teach our children to operate because it's not being taught right now anywhere.
But it's a paradigm shift that predates this super fast processing of data. It predates smartphones and all. Think about this. Now, I'm older than both of you put together.
No, you're not.
Well, close. I grew up in the 50s, and we were taught, respect your elders.
Yes.
You don't talk back to adults. If adult tells you something to do, you do it. Now, I've been teaching for the last 25 years on the air that's flawed thinking. Because if you tell your child that if an adult tells you to do something, you do it, and you don't question that, and you don't be disrespectful. Well, here's the problem with that. If you talk to anyone that is an expert in self-defense, for example,
Mm-hmm.
in protecting yourself, you're teaching a child to self-protect, to stay safe, you have to first teach them to self-protect. And if you tell them to do what an adult says to do and not question that or give them permission to assert themselves, to have self-governance, to protect their body themselves, then some adult says, young man, young lady, get over here. Then they're going to say, well, I do what adults tell me, so here I've got this stranger telling me to come over here. I'm going to do that. They need to have enough independent thought, enough critical thinking to say, this is an adult telling me what to do, but my mind, my intuition is telling me, nah, I don't want to do that. So we need to teach them, wait a minute, why would I do that?
Yeah.
I don't know this person. Why would I do that? I was raised that you give people the benefit of the doubt. That was the Christian thing to do. You give people the benefit of the doubt, which I think is one of the most insane propositions we could ever embrace. You also don't decide that somebody is evil or bad. What you do is you interact with people, you learn about them until you get enough data to make an attribution to them, whether they're okay or they're not okay. That's why it's so bad if someone in a position of authority like teacher, policeman, fireman, someone in a position of authority abuses that with a child, because we say, if you ever get worried or nervous, find a policeman, approach a policeman.
Right.
And if you've got a policeman or a fireman or a teacher or a nurse, somebody in uniform that abuses children, that's the absolute worst violation you could ever have, because now what do? But we have to teach our children to self-protect. That's the only way you're ever going to really get someone to be safe. You can't protect your child all the time. They have to learn to self-protect, and that begins with critical thinking.
Yes.
You've got to get them to say, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right, and you've got to give them permission. We taught our boys from early on, you have permission to say, no, get away from me, you're bad news, and if you're wrong, we got your back. It's okay.
That's right.
You're not going to get in trouble for being disrespectful. It'll be okay. We got your back. By the way, your child's never going to get this unless you role play it with them.
That's right. It has to be
If you don't get out in the yard and teach them to yell, scream, kick, fall on the ground, and roll, they'll never have the courage to do it. Don't ask them to do it for the first time when it actually happens. You need to role play it so they've done it 10 times when it ever happens, and it could save their lives. That's just an example. I'm not getting off on child protection. I'm saying it's critical thinking. Teach them to think.
Okay, so I'm going to share a really funny story, and I won't make it long, but to this point, I will never forget this. I was in 3rd grade, and I had a teacher who was just cruel. She was cruel to the children. She would call them out when they were, especially the ones who were uncomfortable. She was like a bully. There was one day where she was making everybody read a passage from a book, and she had picked on somebody that I could tell was sensitive and didn't want to read. And so she made her read, and this poor girl was sort of cowering and about ready to cry. And I was just so angry. And then she called on me to read, and I didn't. And I just looked at her, and she said, Dominique, read. And I just looked right back at her. And she called me again, and I stood up and I walked right out. So the principal calls my mother. You need to get down to the school right away, blah, blah, blah. My mother shows up at the school, hears that story. She looked at the principal and she said, good for her. My daughter stood up against what she felt was wrong. And I feel so grateful to have had a parent that backed me, that enabled me to have a voice, that enabled me to have discernment, and didn't punish me for, quote, going outside authority. Because you know what? Sometimes authority isn't right.
Yeah.
If you don't teach a child that they have the agency to do that.
To do that, yes.
And you're going to ask them about it later. And if they were just being flip, then that's one thing. But you've got to ask them and follow up with them and reward that self-determination, that that self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not doing that now. We're not teaching children critical thinking. And if we don't start doing that, we're going to have a generation that truly are sheep. When we have media that is running an agenda that is other than the truth, that is insulting the viewer to the point that we're not going to let you make up your own mind. We're going to tell you how to think.
Exactly.
It told me a long time ago, 2 bad words in television are teach and learn. Nobody wants to hear that. I've been to
That's
school.
true.
I don't need to do that. But if when you're telling a story, you can present both sides and say, look, there's 2 sides to this. I'm going to tell you both sides and let you make up your own mind because I respect you as viewers. They're going to respect you right back when you say that. They're going to find that refreshing.
Yeah.
And if you think the deck is stacked and you can say you think the deck is stacked, they're going to respect that too. You know, I always tell people I'm not the repository of all knowledge. I'm not asking you to substitute my judgment for your own. I'm just going to tell you how I have critically thought my way through this. Maybe that's helpful to you. Maybe it's not. Make up your own mind. I'll tell you how I broke it down. Yeah. And then you break it down however you want to. I think that's what people are looking for.
Yeah,
Right.
I think people are looking for that. Adults looking for that. And Dr. I'm curious to your thoughts. I think you've touched on this. I know you touched on this in your book. Our schools today are not teaching our children how to think. Our schools are training our children to be activists or to go along with the crowd, to be a follower. They're not being taught entrepreneurship. They're not being taught leadership. They're being taught to blend in with the crowd, be accepted, and this is how we respond to these different certain situations, and this is how we think. This is how we do. If you look at what happened when we had some of the riots,
yes,
we had young
college
people
campuses
making signs. We had the riots when the George Floyd incident happened. We had the riots when the pro-Hamas. People were making signs. You'd go ask them, and DrPhil, you were on the college campuses during the pro-Hamas riots. You ask them what they're rioting for. What are you? What side? What does this side stand for? They can't answer the question, but they know how to gather, to go out and protest. We have trained up a generation of protesters who don't even know what they're protesting. And if you do that, I just feel as though you can then manipulate them and you can use them. Who was it that said, Benjamin Netanyahu said those pro-Hamas protesters in America are useful idiots. And it's a hard thing to hear, but I think it is reflective of what's happening in our educational institutions.
It is. And I think it's reflective of a generation that's desperate to feel relevant and they don't know how.
Yes.
When you do the news, you can't cover every story.
No.
We have a content sharing arrangement with Daily Mail, for example. We give them some stories, they give us some stories. And I think they filed, I know at one point it was 1,100 stories a day.
Wow.
You guys have a couple hours. You can't cover 1,100. You can't cover 1,100 stories a day.
Right.
There have to be some decisions made about what to cover and not cover. How hard is that?
Well, I think for a morning show, it's actually a joyful process because we're granted 2 hours instead of 30 minutes or an hour, which is what we've come from. So you have more time, which enables you to do, well, one of several things. You can either select a lot of stories and go through them quickly, or you can sit down and you can think, all right, we understand who our audience is, what they want. You do your research on your audience, what they're looking for, and say, okay, these are the types of stories that this audience is interested in. We're not going to kind of gloss over it like what every other outlet does. We're going to put some thought and intent in how we're going to break the information down, the types of guests that we're going to book to further the conversation, the types of questions that we're going to ask of these guests that might be different than what you hear elsewhere. But what's also really nice about what we do, Dr. Phil, is that we've got these opportunities to bring in some lifestyle. We have opportunities to bring in other things that the viewer cares about that may not be so news heavy. There may be a little bit of health. There may be a little bit of what you do in the kitchen. There may be a little bit of family-oriented content, a little bit of humor. So that way it's a palatable, pleasant, interesting start to the day where you feel like you've checked a lot of boxes in content, but you've also checked a really important box, and we were all talking about this before this podcast even began. You checked the box of relationship, and that's our job. Fanchon and I need to have a relationship with the viewer. There has to be trust, there has to be likability, there has to be a reason for the viewer to come to us and not want to go anywhere else. And that reason lies in the content, but it also lies in the relationship, in them feeling connected with who we are as women up there.
And that takes the intentionality, like you said, of the types of guests we're booking, the questions that we're asking, keeping our pulse on what's important to our viewers. So when Dominique says, what is it that our viewers want to hear? It's not that we're telling them what they want to hear in a biased way. It means we are identifying, based on who our viewers are, the issues that are most important to them. It is our job to know what's important to our viewer so that we can present them with that information and give them the fullness of both sides, all sides, whatever it is, of that information that's going to help them make the most critical decisions, the most positive decisions, or the decisions that are going to affect their family when it comes to health, when it comes to education, when it comes to all of the things.
Family, which we've been talking about.
Which is most important. So we take that very seriously every single morning.
I think that's a key, and I'm glad to hear y'all say that, because people ask me if there are things that I would attribute my success to over, 20 plus years. And, there would be a list of things, but one of them would be listening to the audience. Because listen, if you listen, they'll tell you what they want to talk about.
They will.
Exactly. Yes.
They'll tell you what they want to talk about. They won't tell you everything they want to talk about, because sometimes they might not know something is going on until you tell them about it. That's why they call it news. But if you listen and you look at the trends, like I might get one letter about something, and when I say letter, I mean emails. In the beginning, we got letters, but emails. You might get one letter, and okay, they look at it. But then if you get 5,000 letters that are thematic about something, that tells you there are a lot of people interested or concerned about this. If you get 5,000 letters in a week that have to do with drugs in the schools, or they have to do with bullying, or they have to do with affordability of getting kids to school with lunches, or whatever it might be, then that tells you that for every one of those letters that got to you, there were 100 or 1,000 people that didn't write that are worrying about the same thing.
Right.
Then I need to get interested in this. I need to do some research on this and find out what's going on. They'll tell you what they need to hear about.
Yep.
And then when something happens that has a profound effect on everybody's life, and they may not be aware of it until you tell them about it, then you watch and see what the reaction is, right? And then so you go deeper into the story the next day, the next day, the next day.
Right.
But people will tell you what they're interested in.
Absolutely. Every single time.
Well, and what's great too is that, we clearly pay attention to your show and follow what you're covering.
Yeah.
And what's neat about a network like this is that there's such good synergy. So, and as I mentioned earlier, the blessing of a morning show is we've got the gift of time. So you could be touching on a subject, whether it's, you're talking about drugs or social media or something that impacts the family, and we can take your content and we can break that down on a news level and further the story, find a different angle, find somebody who's also been affected by it. So we get to have that conversation intimately as well with different people, different contexts, different information. And that's important, is that the viewer understands that it's not just the DrPhil show, and it's not just Morning on Merit, and it's not just the news on Merit Street, but that this is a living, breathing, cohesive being that's communicating with one another. And DrPhil, if you find something important to cover, then it should be important for us to follow up on that.
Yes. And to amplify it and to help viewers understand it. That's the beauty of having the synergy that we have.
Yeah. And that's why I say we really want Merit Street Media to be an ecosystem where there's interaction between the different shows rather than them being siloed. We're not 100 feet apart.
No.
There's a door between my set and the news set where we can walk back and forth between each other's sets. And if those are actually siloed, like you just drop a tube over each one and there's no way to interact between, what a waste that is.
Total.
It is.
Because if you guys have discovered a story, if there's something breaking over there that is really important, we can go into it in depth. Or if we have a story that we've been working on for 2 weeks and have world-class experts in the building on the show, it would just be so crazy to not walk them off of our set and onto the news set.
That's right.
Yep.
To share with those viewers.
Yes.
That's the beauty of having a true ecosystem where each influences the other.
And the power of that, Dr. Phil, is that when we do that, we're creating an appetite for truth.
Yeah.
When viewers start to see that and they start to see the power of that and their minds begin to open and expand, now we're creating an appetite for people who may not have understood that they were not getting the full truth. Now they want it and they crave it.
And I think, too, it also shows just how big this is.
Yes.
You know, this isn't some little outlet here in Fort Worth, Texas. This is a big deal. There's a lot going on here. And it's that type of large network presence that also creates, is that lack of siloing and the fact that all things speak and talk to one another. And most importantly, all speak the same language.
Yeah. People, they watch and you see what you see on screen. But we have 5 acres under roof here. We
get our steps in.
Go big or go home. That's what we say.
We've got a 5-acre under roof broadcast center here and parking for, 600-800 cars out there when we bring audiences in and that sort of thing. And man, I wish we could lift the top off this building sometime, and it looks like an ant farm in here, particularly during the week with everybody buzzing around and different shows going on and that sort of thing. And for people to see the interaction that's going on, it's energizing. It's energizing to me.
And it hasn't been done before.
No,
I'd like to
really
shoot
hasn't.
a YouTube video with you just walking us through this place.
Oh, I know. We should do that. Yeah, we should do that. I've got 2 golf carts down here because I've got knees that don't like concrete. So I get on the golf cart and zip around because sometimes I go back and forth 7 or 8 times a day from office to the sets and that sort of thing. And I walk through it sometimes and can't believe that we've put all this together.
We pinch ourselves sometimes.
We do too.
Honored to be a part of this.
We just saw Mel Gibson here, and you have to tell everybody about the studios that you have, the trilogy, and what's going on there.
Studios,
yeah, I mean, you keep walking through doors and there's different things, but these are called volume studios, as you know, and this is one of the biggest in the country, if not the world. These 3D wraparound studios that can put you anywhere in the world.
That's right.
It's used a lot in movies. I was talking to Mel when he was here, and they're looking to use it in a project that he's working on. And he's a funny guy.
We almost didn't recognize him. I thought,
no,
who's that guy in the beard and the swim trunks?
We
and
walked right past
Mel
him.
Gibson. That was wild.
As soon as he opens his mouth, of course, you know it's him. But you never know who you're going to run into.
And now that is true. Yeah, that's true. It adds a little bit of suspense.
It does.
But also excitement to every
Who's
single day.
Who's behind door number 3?
Steve Harvey's in and out of here and all the different people. And we have a great time. You guys are killing it on the news.
Thank you,
and we have an evening news as well with Chris Gutierrez, Lonnie Coombs, and Lindsay Keith. I've known Lonnie for, I guess over 15 years now.
From LA?
Yeah, been a correspondent on my show, a former LADA. She's working on the evening news now. So you guys have got this all surrounded. I love that you've got the time in the morning where you can go in depth, and so impressed that when we've had breaking news, when there was an assassination attempt on President Trump, and before I can get here, I come in and you guys are over there looking like you've been here all day. We cut into our programs and we report. I don't ever want anybody to feel like, oh, something's happening, I need to tune out of Merritt Street and into Fox or CNN or one of the 3 major networks to find out what's going on. No, they'll find out right here. We're going to tell them what's going on right here. And we're going to tell them both sides of the story and the facts. We'll have the video. And, people don't understand that news departments subscribe to different news services, UPI, AP, different services where everything comes over a wire and gets to all the news departments at the same time. And we have what everybody else has and a whole lot more because we have the courage to tell them the truth and let them know what's going on. One of the things I've heard people comment about as much or more than anything is the chemistry between the two of you and the comfort between the two of you, that there's a trust between the two of you when you're drilling down on a serious and impactful story and the organic fun that you guys have when you're dealing with something where you can have some fun. They really enjoy that. Are you guys friends off camera?
We are like sisters. And that is not just a saying. There is a certain freedom that comes with working with someone who's not just like a sister. It always makes me emotional because we take our integrity and our credibility very seriously. So when we are there, we're delivering breaking news or we're giving people information that we know they need to have to make the right decisions for their own lives. We want to make sure we get it right. And we are helping each other. We're cheering each other on. We're there to support each other. And that doesn't happen all of the time.
No.
So we also realize that is a very, very special gift. And we don't want to do anything to dishonor that.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what comes out of our mouth is our credibility and it is our integrity in an instant that can be destroyed. And I think we understand that.
We get it. But here's the sweet and funny thing that sort of happened is that, like I said, we met on promo day. And so it was a really quick get to know you. And there was so much in common. And we have discovered over time, we have so many similarities. Our tastes are similar in clothes and food and likes and whatnot. But we also have this really weird thing where we will say the same thing at the same time
with the same
expression.
Yes.
So we've already dubbed ourselves little parrots. And so every time that happens, we look at each other and we say chirp. Because it happens all the time.
All the time, several times a day. And you can't plan for it. It's totally organic. But it's a reminder to us just how very special this relationship is. So it's real. And yes, we do coordinate our clothes and our colors every single day.
Yeah, we get asked that a lot.
Yeah,
and that to us enhances the synergy that people feel just in terms of personality. So we're like, okay, let's bump this up next level.
We're going to step into
it. And so, on Wednesdays we wear pink, which was a total fluke.
Yep.
And then we thought, all right, well, that happened by accident. Now every Wednesday we wear pink and the crew gets in on it.
Yep. And something new is coming.
Oh yeah, something new is coming.
So you guys will see that coming in the next
Tuesdays
couple months.
will be very special.
They will.
All right.
There's
we'll be
your
looking
hint.
for that. We'll be looking for that.
You just stand by.
Now, listen, we're coming into a very important time in less than 100 days, right?
That's right.
To the election. People are starting to do absentee and mail-in voting very soon, if not already in some states. So people are going to be wondering what's going on. The Democrat convention is coming up. We'll have correspondents there that'll be talking to you guys.
Yeah,
and
Lindsay Keith.
Lindsay Keith.
Yep, she's great.
Phenomenal job.
So we'll be following and tracking all of that. And then the election, we've got a lot of special events coming up, and you guys will be covering all of that for us as well. But I wanted people to have a chance to get to know you guys and know why you got out of broadcasting and why you got back in. You got back in on a promise of how things were going to be.
Right.
Yes.
And you need to hold us to that promise. You need to hold me to that promise. You need to hold Merritt Street Media to that promise and not let us stray from the commitment that got you back into this.
Well, I just want to say, Dr. Phil, it is beyond an honor for you to entrust with us the vision that we believe God gave you.
Yes.
Because I've heard it said many times, you are probably the only, or one of the only, if not the only person who can do what you've been tasked to do.
That's exactly
and we
right.
want to make sure that we are part of helping you do that.
Well, you are. You guys have been doing a great job. And this is a great opportunity.
Yes.
You know,
it
to be
is.
given a platform like this, like I said, we got 5 acres under
That's
roof
right.
here. We got great technology. And it's not about the technology other than the extent to which it allows you to immerse people in the stories,
Yes.
where they really are able to feel what's going on, experience
Yes.
what's happening. And we have that ability here. We have
Yeah.
that technology here. So it's only important to the extent that it allows us to really immerse people
Mhm.
in the news, in the stories that we do. We need to be good stewards of this
Yeah.
platform. We
Right.
need to be good stewards of this opportunity. I feel like we've been making great effort at that. We can always do better. We need to get up every day and lean into it. And never is it going to be more important in our short history than the
Right now.
upcoming next 6 to 9 months.
That's right.
And I want people to know, if they want to know what's happening in this, we're not a political network. We're not
No.
a political
Mhm.
show.
Right.
Like you said, doesn't matter what your politics
matter.
are, or yours or mine.
Doesn't matter.
That's right.
I've never voted political parties. I vote
Yeah.
issues.
That's right.
I look
Policy.
at I look at what somebody's doing
Absolutely.
and how it affects the people around me. But I didn't need to do this. I did it because I felt like I should. I was supposed to.
Yep.
So I want to do it right, or not at all.
Yeah.
And I'm getting in deeper every day.
Well, it seems like we've got 3 like-minded
3.
people
That's
here
right.
at this table.
Yeah.
And, you know, we appreciate the vision. We appreciate, like Fanchon said, you entrusting us. But most importantly, we appreciate the relationship, because
Yeah.
you can't do anything well without a good relationship.
Yeah.
And the tools.
that's important. You know,
Yeah.
the tools, I mean, this is like the biggest playground, the biggest tool chest you can find. But I don't care how fancy pants all your tools are. If you don't have good people and good relationships and trust, you don't have anything.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, as long as we keep communicating, and I want the shows to communicate with each other. I want the people to communicate with each other. And I want the viewers to know they can turn this on in the morning, leave it on, and not have to worry their kids are going to see or hear something they shouldn't
Right.
see or hear.
Yes.
And know that we're going to be doing critical thinking. We're going to encourage them to do critical thinking. And if they don't like something we're doing, they can tell us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we keep doing it, that's why they have a remote control.
That's right.
But, you know, we're going to deal with the truth and the facts. You guys are killing it in the mornings, and you're building a great
Thank
audience.
you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
here we go.
Here we go.
In the next 6 to 9 months are going to
Yeah.
Be a wild ride.
going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for talking to me today.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Phil.
All
Dr.
right,
Phil.
we'll see you out there.
Yeah,
All
we'll be
right.
out there.
All right, cool. Thanks.